This week on Siskel and Ebert and the Movies, Gene and Roger reveal their guilty pleasures.
It's basically a beach party movie with a lot of nudity.
Movies they are ashamed to admit they like.
There, I've named them. I feel better already.
Find out what the critics might watch when no one is watching them.
If you feel guilty when you rent these films, you can always say, I'm just renting these for a friend who doesn't have any taste.
That's this week on Siskel and Ebert and the Movies.
Movies we're ashamed to admit we like.
Guilty pleasures this week on Siskel and Ebert.
That's the classic Yankee Doodle Dandy in color. Aren't you glad to know, boys and girls, because that movie was made in black and white before you were born, that the colors of the American flag are red, white, and blue. The process of colorizing classic black and white movies is the subject of this special show called Hollywood's New Vandalism, a title I guess that tips our independently arrived at point of view. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Colorization itself is such an ingenious technological breakthrough that there's a temptation almost to applaud the work that went into it without asking whether it ought to have been done in the first place. What they do is the colorizers take an old black and white movie and assign color values to various areas in the first frames of each individual shot, areas like the faces and clothing of the actors or the sets or landscapes that they're seen against. Then a computer takes over and does the dirty work, individually colorizing thousands of frames so that the result is a movie that looks like it was shot in color. Well, was shot in color. In fact, what it really looks like is it was shot in black and white, and then somebody tried to paint the black and white into pinks and blues and things, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Spray can.
With a spray can, okay? The two major players in the colorizing industry are Colorization Incorporated in Toronto and Color Systems Technology, which is based in Marina del Rey, California, and which currently has a deal with Ted Turner's Atlanta Superstation to colorize 100 old MGM and United Artists classics, movies that Turner bought when he bought the MGM library. Turner recently broadcast Yankee Doodle Dandy on WTBS, his station, and some of the other classics that will be colorized include Errol Flynn and Captain Blood, so now we can see that the blood was red.
Wow.
Betty Davis in the tearjerker melodrama Dark Victory, sure looks dark to me. Humphrey Bogart as a killer on the loose in High Sierra. Those mountains were green, and they had rocks in them that had colors on them. And Bogart again in John Huston's classic thriller, The Maltese Falcon, and I'll bet you that falcon was black. That movie is going to broadcast on Turner Station in November. Meanwhile, the Frank Capra classic, It's a Wonderful Life, will play in a colorized version on many different stations around the country this holiday season, and it's already available in video stores. It's a safe bet that John Huston won't be watching when Ted Turner plays the colorized version of The Maltese Falcon in November. John Huston has joined many other members of the Directors Guild of America in describing the process of colorization as cultural butchery.
It's also a little bit of economic butchery, too, because if people are wondering why some of these titles were selected, for example, It's a Wonderful Life, it's because the film, as you know, is out of copyright. Anyone can do anything they want with it. Television stations can run it for free, and people with color computers can now colorize it and sell it as their own. And again,
as a result of that, the fact is that in a way the colorizers are appropriating somebody else's work, because Frank Capra makes no money from this movie. Jimmy Stewart makes no money from this movie. The writers, the technicians make no money. Only the colorizers have found a way to make it new and sell it again.
And the guy who shot it in black and white and put all the effort in getting the lighting in black and white, he doesn't make a penny either.
Forget about him. Both Jimmy Stewart and Frank Capra have publicly pleaded that the colorizers leave It's a Wonderful Life alone. But, as you said, it's out of copyright, and therefore, like a lot of these movies, it's defenseless. Some of my favorite movies, like The Third Man, are out of copyright. They can do anything they want with it, and yet not a single major movie director anywhere in the world is in favor of colorization. Not one. Directors and a lot of other film lovers believe that black and white films were shot that way for a reason, and they should be left the way the original artist intended them to be done. The colorized movies are turning up on television, and the video stores are full of them. The colorizers seem to feel that there's something missing from a black and white film, as if the film were somehow handicapped by not being in color. Even recent films that deliberately were shot in black and white, even in a color period, are now being colorized. Here's an example of that. George Romero's 1967 horror film, Night of the Living Dead. Well, looking at that leads me to the conclusion that with colorization, first of all, it shouldn't be done at all, but if they're going to do it, they should do it better. Did you notice there in the colorized version of Night of the Living Dead, the sky, the woman's dress, the tombstones, and the shirts on both men were all matching violet. They only apparently had one colorized color on their electronic palette.
Well, you're exactly right. There's one point I want to differ with you a little bit. You're saying that these people in these color companies feel that there's something missing in black and white films and they have the added quality. Raj, they're not really about that. All they are doing is finding another way to play this stuff in prime time TV and make money. They don't have opinions about color films or black and white. They know that they're violating purist stuff. These are not dumbbells. They are money makers. They're businessmen. They know that you can't play Miracle on 34th Street in prime time unless you offer it new and color. That's what this whole thing is about. It's about money. As for your notion about the fact that nobody in the motion picture industry is behind it, there is one person who is behind it, and this is kind of shocking. It happens to be a former president of the Motion Picture Academy. I want to read you how his mind changed and what it more portends for the future. It's Gene Allen.
This isn't a director, though. I said no director was in favor of colorization.
This is still a big guy in the movie industry, okay?
Gene Allen?
Gene Allen, he was the president of the Motion Picture Academy. In September of 1984, this is the Wall Street Journal, he's quoted as saying, as against colorizing Casablanca, a film that's going to be colorized. I don't think we've ever seen perfect color, said Gene Allen. But perfect black and white, that has been achieved. So he was against it in September of 84. Now, 3 months later, January 85, suddenly he's in favor. What happened? Gene Allen has accepted a post with Color Systems Technology. He's going to advise them. And what does he say now? Color conversion is an idea whose time has come. Maybe there was a check in the mail that came too. When Color Systems first approached me for advising the coloring of George Cukor's Camille, this is Gene Allen talking, I began to realize that I had a unique opportunity to protect Mr. Cukor, that's George Cukor, the director's artistic intent. Having worked with him for 18 years, I felt it was almost an obligation. Yeah, if it was such an obligation, why didn't he do it while George Cukor was alive?
I can only imagine what George Cukor would say about a colorized Camille. What's going to happen, though, I'm afraid, is that Gene Allen may be at the beginning of a shameful parade of people who are going to go over to colorization because there's so much money in it.
Yes, there is a lot of money.
Right now, it's brand new. It's easy for everybody to say, oh, black and white is sacred, let's not colorize. The more money that's made, the more people will line up to make some of that money. And all of the studios, for example, the directors who work for the studios are against colorization. The studios can't move fast enough to sell their old black and white movies to colorization. It's a way to recycle that inventory. And you're right. You're absolutely right. It's a story about money, not about art.
You got that right. Now, what if you like the new colorized movies? Well, coming up next, we'll show you some ridiculous examples of how badly they're being colored.
I jumped in the river to save you so I could get my wings. Uh-oh.
The coloring of black and white movies for profit. How do I hate thee? Let me count the ways. First of all, I don't think anyone has the right to obliterate another person's artistic creation. You know, they arrest people who spray paint subway cars. They lock up people who attack paintings and sculptures in museums. And adding color to black and white films, even if it's only to the tapes shown on TV or sold in stores, is vandalism nonetheless. The power of the stark black and white image is one of the great treasures of the movies. The late, great French director Francois Truffaut told me he never wanted any film of his movies to be in color. He was forced to because his films were financed in part by European television, which knew that color films usually draw higher ratings. But Truffaut told me that when he wrote the script of his movies, he never once mentioned color. It wasn't important to him, one of our great film artists. Now we're supposed to believe that some businessmen with computers are going to improve the movies? Ridiculous. But let's look at what they're doing. And when you do look closely at what they're doing, their work is even more insulting. First of all, there's a certain timidity about the colors used. Lots of pastels, as in this scene from the Cary Grant comedy, Topper. The coloring of Yankee Doodle Dandy is a visual mess, with some scenes where everything is awash with blue except the skin tones, which are the same for every actor. So much for the actor's individuality. And thanks for letting me know what your computer thought director Michael Curtiz wanted Jimmy Cagney's skin to look like. Flesh. Wow, what a surprise. The coloring is even more laughable than the classic It's a Wonderful Life, where the computer didn't care enough to color the background of the dramatic scene where Jimmy Stewart attempts suicide. That's right. At a great emotional moment like this, it really helps us to know that his sport coat may have been a gray tweed. Thanks a lot. Surely you get the point. Adding color adds needless information at critical times, and it can often soften the impact of a performance, as in Lionel Barrymore's classic villainous banker in It's a Wonderful Life. In black and white, he's a cold terror. In color, look at the difference. With a navy coat and a fleshy face, he's softer, less harsh, more like you and me. Yes, the dead Lionel Barrymore is pulled back from the grave through electronics to give a lesser performance. How dare they? Coloring also stumbles when the actors move. Look at the color bleeding in the scene from Yankee Doodle Dandy. Oh, why, you can hear the colorists complaining, did Jimmy Cagney have to move around so much? Why did he have to dance? Why was he such a great artist? And then there are the classic gaffes. Look at the scene of Frank Sinatra in the assassination thriller Suddenly. What's wrong? His eyes. Old Blue Eyes is back, all right. Look at this, as Old Brown Eyes. The process isn't perfected, obviously, but I don't want to even get into that argument because that argument's a trap. Yankee Doodle Dandy was photographed in black and white by one of the greatest cinematographers of all time, James Wong Howe. The film became a classic in black and white. Adding color isn't going to make it a better film, and even the people who own the coloring companies will admit that if you push them. It's just a process, as we said before, to make money from a new way of packaging great old movies.
You know, Gene, looking at those clips, one thing is very obvious. They start not with a blank sheet, as a color film does, but with a sheet that is already colored black and white. So they've got to find colors they can lay on top that will show up. And so they tend to pick, you can see it there, light blues, light greens, pinks, violets, yellows, colors like that. These guys in the 30s and 40s, Cagney looked like he was going out to commit murder. Colorized, he looks like he's going out to play golf. It's totally inappropriate. When we come back, we're going to ask a very basic question. What was so wrong about black and white movies in the first place? Colorization of old black and white movies, which we call Hollywood's new vandalism. Now, some of the defenders of colorization claim that they're actually performing a public service. They say young people are turned off by black and white movies. They won't watch them on TV. I guess they haven't seen all the black and white videos on MTV, the music videos that teenagers seem to watch even though they're not in color. The colorizers argue that by coloring the old classics, they're going to get the kids to watch them, and that'll be good for the kids and good for the movies. Well, if the worst thing that ever happens to some kid is that he has to watch a movie in black and white, I don't really think I can work up very much sympathy for him. In fact, I think parents almost ought to take kids and say, hey, look, this is another way that movies used to be made, and it's part of your cultural heritage.
Good idea.
The whole flaw here is the feeling that black and white films are lacking in something. Actually, I believe that black and white adds something to the movie-going experience. Stop to think for a minute. Real life is in color, but movies aren't real. They're fantasies. And by filming in black and white, they can sometimes be more dreamlike and elegant and stylized and mysterious. They can add a whole additional dimension to reality, while color sometimes just supplies additional unnecessary information. These days, there's tremendous commercial pressure on directors to shoot everything in color because color TV and color video rental demands it. All the same, in recent years, some of our best directors have overcome enormous pressures to fight for the right to shoot in black and white. Those directors include David Lynch, whose Elephant Man was dramatic in black and white, but might have looked like a circus sideshow in color. Mel Brooks, whose great comedy Young Frankenstein was a satire on old horror films, and so, of course, it shouldn't have been in color, because the old films weren't in color. And Francis Coppola, whose teenage movie Rumblefish used highly stylized black and white and a few dramatic flashes of color. I believe that black and white is often actually preferable to color, especially in movies where movement and timing and atmosphere are more important than pretty pictures or landscapes. color can add too much information to a scene. And for example, let's make a comparison here. Let's take a look at the big fight scenes from two recent, very well-received boxing films. We're going to start with Sylvester Stallone's Rocky IV in color. Okay, that was Rocky fighting in color. Now here's a black and white fight scene with Robert De Niro from Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull. Well, obviously, the cards are stacked because I'm going to say I like Raging Bull better, but the fact is I did, because there's something so brutal and direct and forceful about boxing that color just makes it too pretty.
Roger, I'm going to make a blanket statement. If I had to choose between seeing all the movies for the rest of my life in color and all of them in black and white, there is no question that I would take black and white. And why? It's just what we've been harping on here a lot, which is color so often adds unnecessary information. It's just not relevant. In black and white, we can see what the damage is doing to the person. I don't need the color. I don't care about the color of their trunks, their facial tones. What I'm supposed to know is the brutality of a man hitting another man's face. Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull was a violent man. It doesn't matter that he was a violent man who wore a brown suit.
You're absolutely right, or red boxing trunks for that matter. And you know, I want to look right now at a movie that some people feel is the greatest film ever made, a movie called Citizen Kane. It was made in 1941 by Orson Welles. This is a movie that they haven't yet had the nerve to even talk about colorizing, because I believe if anyone tried to colorize Citizen Kane, there'd be picket lines out in front of that man's house at night and out in front of his office in the morning. Look at this scene and see how beautiful it is in black and white, the way the dark shadows in the scene create a mood of emptiness and loneliness and desolation in the great hall of Kane's mansion.
What are you doing? Oh, one thing I never can understand, Susan. How do you know you haven't done it before?
Makes a whole lot more sense than collecting statues.
You may be right. I sometimes wonder.
Now, those shadows in the back of that shot are totally black. In real life and in color, there is no such thing as total black. You can't get total black in a color film. And so if you colorize that, you would have a very weird and strange-looking room rather than what you have there, which is one of the most beautiful rooms ever created in a movie.
Orson Welles, whenever he was quoted about the film and all the writing about this film, always the name of Greg Toland, the cinematographer, is mentioned. A great debt to Greg Toland for helping to make this movie. And now they want to obliterate what Greg Toland added to the movie.
I don't think they'll do it. I don't think anyone will have the nerve to do it to Citizen Kane.
I agree with you. They won't cross the line because they'll be playing with fire.
And that'd be going too far. Coming up next, we want to invite you to join in a little home experiment that you can perform on your own television set.
The fool's going to... the sheriff's going to do it!
This proposal. I believe that black and white is actually better than color for some movies, especially comedies where timing, movement, and dialogue are a lot more important than color. So I'd like to invite you to enlist in a guerrilla war against colorization by renting your favorite comedy that was shot in color and then taking it home and adjusting your TV set to watch it in black and white. I think it'll make it funnier, and that's what I'm going to do right here with a famous scene from Mel Brooks' great comedy, Blazing Saddles. Now, you've probably seen this scene many times in color, but here it is in black and white.
Hey, you can't park that animal over there. It's illegal.
Here we go. It was just as funny even when we couldn't see what color the horse was.
Right.
Now, I know there are probably a lot of people from the colorizing companies in Toronto and out of Marina Del Rey who are sitting right now probably watching this show and saying, no, they're probably watching Honeymooners reruns, trying to think what they're going to do to them, but they're watching our show and thinking that the idea, my idea of turning color movies into black and white is the dumbest idea they've ever heard of. And all I've got to say is it may be dumb, but it's not quite as dumb as what you're doing.
Yeah, they'd probably like to have our show in all white or all black. I want to make one sort of serious point in conclusion, because I think there's another argument that they would say is, but fellas, we're not destroying these old movies. All those old movies can be shown in theaters, in revival theaters, if anybody wants to go. Or if you want to rent them in black and white, rent them in black and white. All we're going to do is give people an option. And we're going to show them in primetime TV on cable stations and anywhere else we can show them. Well, my answer is that they are probably going to win the battle. That these movies are going to be shown to millions of people. A whole new generation will see the Maltese Falcon in color, possibly Citizen Kane in color. And you know what? They won't look as good. We agree on that. And as a result, the golden era of movies by these people will have become tarnished.
You're absolutely right. They may not be tampering with the underlying movie, but they're tampering with the audience's expectations. And that's a crime. That's it for this week.
Since that broadcast, the U.S. Copyright Commission has ruled that colorized movies may be eligible for copyright if it can be proven that the people that make the alterations are making a significant artistic contribution. I think they're making, as we pointed out, a significant artistic mutilation. In addition, Congressman Richard Gephardt has introduced the Film Integrity Act of 1987 that is currently before the Judiciary Committee. His bill would prohibit the material alteration of film, including colorization, without the consent of the principal writer and the director. Naturally, I support that bill.
Unfortunately, though, that bill will only apply to movies from this day forward, not to all of the great movies in history that have been colorized or could be colorized. So right now, it's the bottom of the ninth. The good guys are behind by a couple of runs, but the game isn't over yet. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with a look at movies on video that we call guilty pleasures. Movies we're almost ashamed to say we like. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.